oil, and it wiped out the industry in France. All the grapes in the European grapes in France died. They died in Italy. They died across the regions. And what saved them was they took the vines, the Cabernet Sauvignons, the Cabernet Francs, and they grafted them onto root stock that came from the US that was impervious to phylloxera. So ultimately, during this time when all of those grapes were wiped out, Europe started planting Norton. And for a very brief time around the turn of the century, it became one of the most popular grapes, not only in Europe, but in the US, and actually won a lot of awards for quality wine. And then it disappeared, and nobody really grew it for many, many years until recently, where it began having a resurrection, if you will, in Virginia. Now it's a very popular grape there. So some are growing this in North Carolina. It's becoming more popular. We're going to have our first full harvest this year of it, but just a very exciting grape because it's either an American or hybrid, depending who you talk to, but it's the only native grape that you can truly make a wine that tastes like a European wine from. Just real quick on the vineyard, we don't always have success in what we grow. So ultimately, we did take some vines out. Viognier, I love the wines that come from Viognier in North Carolina. If you haven't had them, there's a lot of successful wineries that do have it. I think it's going to be one of the most popular white wines we grow in North Carolina, but not at Round Peak. It's very, very difficult to get a good yield, and we ultimately decided to remove it. Sangiovese is another one we actually used to be known for, our Sangiovese. But with our weather conditions, it's very, very hard to ripen Sangiovese. So we ultimately made the decision to remove it and planted Petit Verdot and Tannat in its place. And the Nero d'Avola, which is a Sicilian grape, which I really like. We planted, only kept it a couple of years. It was clear it wasn't going to be great, and we pulled it out. So like all businesses, we learn, sometimes from our mistakes. I'm not going to go through all of these. You can read some of this pretty quickly. I think I covered a lot of it, but the point I want to kind of focus on in our focus is within Round Peak, we focus on primarily dry reds. We do whites and rosés, of course, but one of the key things is that we focus on expressing the growing conditions we have on the East Coast in our wines. We do not try to go out and mimic wines that are made in Napa or Sonoma or out on the West Coast, where you have these very, very dry, long growing seasons. You have these very intense, big, fruity wines. That is not the style that we try for. And it's not the style that most wineries in North Carolina try for. We have much more balanced wines, much more typical of what you would see coming out of Bordeaux in France, or in our case, the Loire Valley, a little north in France, because those are the conditions we grow. Our climate is very similar to those. The number of what's called growing degree days, the amount of sunlight essentially that we have over the growing period, much more similar to that. Certainly, if you know California, you know North Carolina, we get a lot more rain here, a lot more humidity. So that factors in as well. So our wines tend to be much lighter than California, more balanced, and I think personally more approachable. We embrace that, and we try our best to make wines representative of our area. And I think that is, again, what you see across our region. And then, I'm going to kind of shift gears here a little bit because I do have limited time. I don't want to run over, and talk a little bit about COVID. I think everybody knows back in March of last year is when we first were impacted by it. We, like many other businesses, were completely shut down. We were only allowed to do takeout. And takeout wine isn't a really big selling point. It's not like takeout food where everybody still wanted to go out and get it. So we were very, very slow for those first few weeks. And then initially, when we were starting to open back up, wineries, breweries were classified as bars. And we were not going to be allowed to open up until phase, I think it was 3. We were not going to be in that phase 2.5 time. And that was really going to kill a lot of our businesses. So there was a huge grassroots effort between the wineries, breweries. Every one of us was on the phone to our local politicians and to Raleigh And at the very, very last minute, at 5 o'clock on May 25th, which was when phase 2 was supposed to roll out, or phase 2.5, the governor signed a decree that we would be included with restaurants instead of bars. And so that was huge because it allowed us to open at limited capacity for on-site consumption. So we've essentially been in that mode ever since, with primarily outdoor tastings. We don't do flights currently in our tasting room. We pour flights of 6 wines and we allow people to carry them out onto our patio to enjoy them. And if you've been to our tasting room, it's because we have a 20 by 20 foot room, basically, very limited capacity. And when you social distance, we can fit 10 people. So without an outdoors, it would have been very difficult anyway. So throughout the summer, I think for those of you who are in the tourism industry, Surrey County, I think, did pretty well as far as tourism goes, because everybody was trying to get out of the cities. And if you looked at our parks, throughout the summer, and the trails, they were full. You couldn't get into some of the parks. They were turning people away. And that really helped our business, because a lot of the people that were coming out would come out and visit wineries while they're out hitting the parks, et cetera. And so we had actually a relatively good summer as far as the traffic, the number of visitors that were coming, because we have a nice outdoor patio, very large, covered, and some of the pictures kind of show that. But then obviously as we got into winter, that changed a bit, because now it's cold and people don't want to be outside. So we've seen that drop in traffic. Obviously we expected that. And so what we've tried to do to mitigate that is put up curtains, which we've had for many years, but we almost never put up because it was really designed for weddings. But now what we've done is build a frame around our patio and put them up permanently for the winter. You can sort of see in some of the pictures that we have heaters. So if we have a nice sunny day, even if it's only 30, 35 degrees out, it'll be 60 inside our back patio, very comfortable. And we've been able to maintain that so far throughout the winter months. We haven't had a crazy severe cold snap come through yet. So, and we're hoping we won't. So we've been able to have people still sitting out and enjoying it, but we've put the curtains around. We have a bonfire every weekend, and we're still trying to do we social distance our tables inside the patio room, and we do have openings on either end to keep some airflow going. But between blocking the wind and basically our big clear panels acting like a greenhouse, it's been pretty comfortable inside. And the other thing I'd like to just mention briefly is I put a couple pictures of our disc golf course in there. It's not a sport everybody plays, but if you're interested, we have discs you can rent. It's great for kids. If you want to come out and hang on the patio and send your kids off to play disc golf, it's a very kid-friendly course. And that's actually been really helpful to bring people out as well, because we do allow people just to walk wherever they want on the property. We're dog friendly. We really try to focus on having people come out and relax and enjoy the outside. And, provided it's not a cold, rainy, snowy day, we still get a reasonable turnout on the weekends. I think I'm going to end just with a tiny bit about our brewery and open it up to any questions. The brewery came about very much like our Skullcamp wines did. We had a lot of traffic in our winery, and after we started serving the sweet wines, there was still a number of people who would come in that didn't drink wine at all. So we started carrying bottled beer to serve that, section of our customers. And over time, we just decided we might as well make our own, because I've been a brewer since way back in the 1980s, which tells you how old I am. Our winemaker at the time was a brewer, and our vineyard manager was a brewer. So we started making our own beer in 2012. It grew very quickly, and ultimately we decided to expand and had to choose where to do that. And we chose Elkin because it not only it was close by and fit what we wanted to do, but the old Basin Creek restaurant was sitting at the time unused, and it just intrigued us as a location. So if you remember the old Basin Creek building, which is pictured down on the left once we renovated it, We took over that building. It took us 4 years to renovate it and get it up and running, but ultimately opened our new tap room and smokehouse in that building in 2018. And so our focus is great core beers. You know, IPAs are the big craze right now, but stouts and porters and, you know, red ales. We do a lot of wine barrel and bourbon barrel aged beers. Obviously, as a winery, we have the opportunity to do some unique things. We take grapes from our vineyard down to the brewery and brew them with our beers. But number one thing is great core beers, focus on quality, no different than the winery. If you don't have a quality product, you're not going to be successful. And then we don't filter. We make very fresh beers. We don't filter. We have to keep our beers cold, and we're really trying to focus locally. With the pandemic, it's been very difficult, frankly, to distribute our beers across the state, because with bars right now not allowed to be open past 9 and limited capacity, everybody has a lot of beer. They're all trying to sell it, and we've realized that it's just, you know, it doesn't work very well in the current situation. So we really focused on just being local, providing our beers through our brewery and through our winery, and trying to make basically the freshest beer we can. So, you know, that's Skull Camp. We do have a restaurant there. We're bringing every other Saturday one food item up from the restaurant to sell at the winery during the day. This coming Saturday, it's going to be our peel and eat shrimp, or peeled shrimp, tossed in our various sauces that we use for our wings. We like to do food trucks, but right now with the number of people coming out, it's hard to get food trucks interested in visiting wineries. So what we've done for the meantime is actually offer food from our smokehouse at our winery for probably the next month or two until it warms up, and then we'll go back to having food trucks. So right now we're doing music and food from our smokehouse every other weekend. This Saturday it's going to be shrimp. So I saw somebody send a note about, do cans taste different than bottles with the wine? And the answer is no. When we put our wine in the cans, and we've done this now for 3.5 years, we've been tasting those wines throughout the time to see if they change at all or they don't. And they really don't. They taste the same. The problem, though, is they always taste the same. So we don't put dry red wine that we want to age in cans, because the nice thing about bottles with red wines is they age and become smoother. Once you put it in a can, it never changes. So we only put wine into cans that we want to taste like it did when we put it into the can. They don't change. But the good news is, because of the lining, et cetera, they really do stay good, and they actually are more protected than bottles. The other one I was going to mention is there was a question about wine being put into whiskey barrels, et cetera. Very much changes the perception of them. We age our wines now in bourbon barrels, and we've released one. We're going to release another shortly. There's no regulation against that. And if you go out into the market today, you'll see a lot of wineries from California now promoting their bourbon barrel aged Cabernet Sauvignons and wines like that. And that's beginning to be a trend in North Carolina as well.